welcome back to McChats here on McGTV. That's youtube.com/MikeMcGTV. Follow me on Twitter at MikeMcGTV. Welcome to a little Twin Peaks retrospective and discussion, if you couldn't tell from that fabulous Gordon Cole impersonation. I'm here with Jason from 3 Geeks Podcast. Follow them at youtube.com/3 Geeks Network or on Twitter at 3 Geeks Podcast. We'll actually be joining forces this next weekend at Wizard World Columbus. The 3 Geeks Podcast will be there full 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I join up with them at the Greater Columbus Convention Center on Saturday and Sunday for the booth, panels, lots of random fun. Anything in particular you want to kind of tout for the weekend, Jason?
I'm looking forward to all of it. We got a sponsorship at our booth, so that'll be a lot of fun to kind of promote that. I'm looking forward to watching somebody beat Max at Mario Kart. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but Max went undefeated last year, and that can't stand. So I'm looking forward to seeing him get beat.
Like, the only time there were wins at the booth was when Philip was filling in for him, right?
Yeah. Even then, sadly, Philip won a lot more than he probably should have.
If Philip's listening to this, we're not knocking on your skill, but...
Oh, I was.
Okay.
Totally knocking on your skill, Philip.
So, hopefully Max will meet his match this coming weekend. Hopefully we get some awesome interviews, and hopefully we get to give away some cool prizes at some panels.
Yeah, I hope they get the time right in the pamphlets, because I don't want any angry people again this year.
C'est la vie. We'll just take it as it is. We're very easygoing. We're very chipper and upbeat, much like Dale Cooper about the whole experience.
Right, man. I like my 3 days of escapism into a culture where everybody gets along and is happy and there's no fighting, for the most part.
Well, aside from, like, potential nitpicking.
Yeah.
But before we get into the retrospective, you might hear me every once in a while chewing. It's because I'm eating something in very particular on this particular day. Any guesses as to what that is, Jason?
Cherry pie.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Damn fine.
Damn fine. It's pretty good, honestly. Like, I got it to go from the diner this morning, because typically on Sundays I'll go to a diner that I usually go to just get coffee and breakfast. And lately, ever since the revival came back onto Showtime, I posted a photo earlier where it's like every time I walk into the diner and start to eat my breakfast or drink coffee, cool jazz starts to play in my mind. And so I'm like, yeah, David Lynch has had an impact on the way I perceive the world so far. And so I thought, why not? I'm chatting with Jason today. I might as well get some cherry pie to go. So it's delicious. But we're not here to talk primarily about cherry pie. We're here to talk about David Lynch and all the wonderful, weird, quirky storytelling and characterization he puts into his projects, especially Twin Peaks. Now, we were just talking before we started recording here. Jason, you're kind of a new audience to the Lynchverse or whatever.
I am. I've watched Twin Peaks and I've watched Blue Velvet. I recently acquired Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive, which I'm going to watch very, very soon. I need to find a racer. His movies are not easy to find. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to just soak it all in. I loved Blue Velvet and I loved Twin Peaks, and that's what made me go back and watch Blue Velvet. Actually, it was episode 8 of the revival that made me realize that, holy shit, I really am a Lynch fan. I need to go back and watch more of his stuff.
You're in for a treat with Lost Highway, because several things in there, I'm going to whittle it down to at least 2. One, it shows how much Bill Pullman is underappreciated in his lifetime, because that dude turns in some stellar work in that film. Like, it's really cool. He plays this down and out, destitute, almost jazz saxophonist, and one of Lynch's big themes is duality. So there's a point in the film where he kind of disappears for a while, but then comes back, and it's a pretty devastating performance, I'd want to say. So one is underappreciated Bill Pullman. 2, when you watch Robert Blake in this movie, you'll be like, why wasn't that guy ever cast in a Joker role? So that's all I'll say. I'm fairly certain he did actually kill somebody. In real life, yeah. It's like, oh yeah, to quote Dave Chappelle, Beretta did that shit. What did you appreciate most about, say, Blue Velvet?
The quirkiness. I mean, that movie showed me, and the Return has a lot too. But man, Kyle MacLachlan is one hell of an actor. That's what I took out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Just watching him on that and watching him in Twin Peaks, especially the new Twin Peaks.
Sorry, I'm eating. But had you seen Twin Peaks first, and then get to Blue Velvet?
I saw Twin Peaks first, and then I went back.
I had a kind of similar experience with regards to my watching the Lynch filmography, because I really didn't know much about Twin Peaks when it first came out in the 90s. Because I think we were at that age where it would go over our heads. We were, 6 or 7 probably at that point?
Yeah.
Even though it was a big cultural milestone for the adults, we were still very much in the kids' stuff, I feel, around that point. So I really didn't vibe to Twin Peaks until halfway through my sophomore year of high school, I want to say. Because that's when my dad thought I might enjoy weird movies. He showed me a bunch of old horror movies, finally. He showed me, like, some more, let's say, mature content with regards... Because he saw that I was taking a liking to more mature stuff. Like, I got into Spawn on HBO around that time. And he was like, okay, well, if you like that kind of weird mindfuckery, you'll love David Lynch. So, the first Lynch thing I ever saw was Fire Walk With Me, was the Twin Peaks prequel / sequel. And that just messed with my head for several days. Because I had no idea what was going on, but I was like, this is so weird, but so cool. And I know for a lot of diehard Twin Peaks fans out there, that kind of... You're like, how could you start with the prequel? That gives away everything. By the time I came around to the original series, I had completely forgotten all the twists that were revealed to me in the prequel. And so I was surprised the second time. Because all I remember from Fire Walk With Me that first time was like, what the fuck is this about? It really got me into that Lynch world, and I started... Well, then I watched Mulholland Drive, and Eraserhead I finally got around to, and Blue Velvet actually was... Similar to you, what came after my Peaks binge was Blue Velvet. I'm like, yeah, Kyle MacLachlan, you kind of rock. Curious for you, what was your exposure specifically to Peaks? When was the earliest you could recall?
I was a big Lost fan, and I remember watching interviews and watching the Lost panels because I really got into that show. And just seeing Damon Lindelof discussing how Twin Peaks was, the show that showed him that TV didn't have to be formulaic. It could be event television. It could be something that left the living room and went into, the workplace more so than the cooler talking about, oh, Ross and Rachel kissed last night. It could be more than that. It could be theorizing, trying to figure out what's going on, getting together with your friends, a more communal experience. And I was like, I got to check this show out. And after Lost ended, I had another bird on my shoulder, Dan, who does a lot of stuff with us on the podcast, just kept telling me, dude, you gotta watch Twin Peaks. The show is everything that you're gonna love about television. And I'm like, okay, I'll get to it. And finally watched the first season, and man, it was something else. I didn't really understand necessarily what I was watching all the time, and I put some time between season 1 and 2, and I went to start season 2, and I'm like, I can't watch this. I don't remember what happened. So I watched season 1 again, and I was even more into it the second time around. I'm watching season 1 again now. But, season 1 again. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so brilliant. And then I went into season 2, and I have not looked back.
I wanted to kind of add on what you were saying with regards to Lost, especially, is that, event storytelling, but also the idea that it's not about... And this is something I'm finding out with regards to the revival, and something I had with regards to feelings about Lost or other shows along that point, where it's not so much about what you're heading towards in that show. The resolution really doesn't matter, but the characterization and all the little relationships between characters and how they interweave into this grand story really sells you on those shows more so than the actual like gimmick of, because Twin Peaks, when you get down to it, it isn't about the mystery really, because there are a lot of mysteries going around. Like, it isn't about finding out who killed Laura Palmer, because that honestly takes a back seat to a lot of the drama that's taking place in between characters, especially in that first season.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess Lynch didn't even want to, reveal who killed Laura Palmer, and we'll get into it with our theorizing, but I can definitely see that playing out a little bit in this season, the latest.
Yeah, is that they just want to, it's a gimmick that starts off the show, but then propels it forward, and the characters are able to take it and run with it. Like, absolutely,
man. Finally, somebody else who gets lost the way I got lost. It's exactly the right. It was about the characters, and Twin Peaks in a lot of ways is about the characters.
Well, here's my feelings, and we're not going to get into Lost, because honestly, I can retain more from Twin Peaks than I can from all the seasons of Lost, even though I do remember, particular quirks and characters and things that took place on that show, is that Twin Peaks at least felt like it had its eye more on the ball with regards to mythology, even though, as we'll discuss, a lot of the mythology came about as complete accidents as they were making the show.
Absolutely.
But I felt it always, even though it kind of had that, okay, let's just throw this in here, once it throws something to the audience, it adheres to it. Like, it's like, okay, we're going to throw in, the black and white lodges. They're not just these weird dreams Coop has. It's like, it's an actual kind of spiritual realm. People are able to enter and leave and things like that, and there are malevolent and benevolent spirits there. Fine. But then they don't have to say, like, oh, they have to follow the rules regular shows would, because it is otherworldly, so we can get pretty out there, but at the same time make sense, if that makes any sense to you.
No, it does, 100%, and it's more, yeah, we'll get into it, but that is very prevalent in the new Return.
And we should say right out of the gate, big spoilers for not just the original series, but for what's taking place in the revival so far, because I've waited for a while to be able to get really in-depth with somebody about not just the original series, but what Lynch is doing right now on Showtime. So beware, we're going to tap into storylines and stuff that may have been resolved, or we will theorize how they're going to resolve. So spoilers. Before we get into the revival, I was curious, do you have, I think we can agree we both like Cooper.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kyle MacLachlan, like we mentioned before, phenomenal talent, great actor. You could tell this is a character he really injected a lot of charm and, again, quirkiness, because I feel that's a pivotal to a lot of Lynch stuff, is quirk. He's a very likable, I don't want to say lead, but he's a likable central protagonist that a lot of the other characters work off of very well. But you mentioned, like, revisiting season 1 a lot. Who would you say are, aside from Cooper, like one or two favorite characters from season 1?
I like the sheriff, and I like Albert. I love their interactions in the beginning of the series too.
Mm-hmm. Albert just being this very cold, standoffish guy, and the one thing that sticks out to me is Harry punching him and in the morgue, and they're fighting over the corpse of Laura Palmer, essentially. Yeah. Which is disturbing, but kind of funny as well.
The log lady. Mm-hmm. I love the log lady.
What's her name? Margaret? Yeah.
Margaret, yeah. And Shelley Johnson and Leo Johnson and Bobby. That I like that little trio too. And the guy who plays Leo plays an asshole so well.
He reminds me of, I know it's not the same guy, I don't think, but he reminds me of the ponytail bad guy from Karate Kid Part 3. Like, if that dude went on to go to Twin Peaks and just became a raving lunatic after getting his ass handed to him.
Yeah, but, of course, Lucy and Andy.
Yeah, Lucy and Andy are kind of fun. I like Andy. Season 1 felt like the best utilization of Andy, in my opinion. Like, when they get into their stuff, their drama in season 2, I'm like, oh, okay, this is good background stuff. Wasn't really interested in that so much. But when Andy basically starts off the series as this whimpering kind of spineless deputy, and then the final episode of season 1 is dude shoots Jock essentially to save Harry and is like stone cold about it. I'm like, damn, Andy. Like, I like that. But then he immediately reverts back to simple Andy when he has to go talk to Lucy, and she's like, I'm pregnant.
And Ray Weiss as Leland Palmer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Going into the show not knowing anything about David Lynch, I'm like, okay, this guy's overdoing it a little bit. The performance, I mean, I get it, you know, as a father, you would be very upset when your daughter died, but as the whole season goes, he's just really over the top, and then, you know, when you find out a little bit more about why, and you go back and watch it again, all of those choices make so much sense. The way he portrayed that character is so good.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of Lynch's genius, too, with regards to the show, is that he starts off the pilot episode very much in the tone of the way you would expect a crime drama thriller series to start off. Everyone has very natural reactions to hearing this news about Laura Palmer dying. But then as the series goes on and you realize it's not really focusing on that so much, and then you get a little bit more of the humor and the purposefully melodramatic moments, you start to see how David Lynch subverts your expectations for this show subtly. And Leland is a great example. When you first meet him in the pilot and he gets the news from Harry about Laura, you're right. It is a very natural response. You buy that this is a father who's just lost his daughter. And even when he's in the morgue with her for the first time, like, I buy that response. But then as the series goes on, and you just see him start to just have breakdowns on the dance floor whenever they start playing big swing music. And he's just there rocking himself and crying. And Ben's like, go dance with him, Catherine. Make it look normal. Like, that stuff, I'm like, it's still tragic, but it's funny. It's hilarious. And it's a credit to Ray Wise to sell it comedically, but also sell that, man, this guy is messed up, and you find out why later on. I'd have to say some favorites from season 1, because, yeah, I like Cooper. I like Harry. He even mentions it. He plays a good Watson to Cooper's Holmes, and I like the way they work off of each other. But it's a lot of the satellite characters caught up in their own melodrama I gravitated towards the most in season 1. Like Pete, Jack Nance from Eraserhead, comes back as Pete, and he has some of my favorite lines in this show ever. Like his opening where he's like, she's dead, wrapped in plastic. Like, even then, it's you can tell there's a tone of seriousness to it, but just his delivery makes me smile. Like when he's talking to them about the coffee, it's like, you wouldn't believe it, but there was a fish in the percolator. Like, I love that.
I do too.
And he's just so likable. Like, he's just a genuinely likable character in that first season. Even though he's doing some underhanded stuff, like he's helping Josie to kind of undermine his wife's authority. But then, towards the end of the first season, he and Catherine have something of a reconnection. But even that's done away with when they're searching the library. He's like, it's my old yearbook. I thought I lost it. And she's like, oh, Pete. Like, I love that. So he was one of my favorites. Honestly, Bobby quickly became one of my favorites based off of the Shelley Leo stuff that you mentioned. Because it could have gone the wrong way where he's just a thoroughly unlikable kid. And yeah, red herring central for prime suspect.
He barks with the best of them, though.
Yeah. But immediately Cooper sees through that. And that's another thing I love about the show is Cooper is sharp. Like, as goofy as he can be, he is sharp. Like, he's able to read people's relationships based on body language. He's able to quickly determine that it's like Bobby's not smart enough to pull off a murder. So, but the thing is, like, yeah, Bobby's kind of an idiot and bonehead, but there's more to him there. Like, you can tell he genuinely loves Shelley, and he genuinely doesn't want to see her get hurt by Leo. And he's got a little bit of cleverness to him when he's trying to implicate Leo and James. He was more interesting than James, honestly.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, they couldn't really figure out what to do with James post season 1.
Yeah.
He definitely, Bobby. Yeah, I agree. And again, in the return, he does some stuff that I really like.
Well, yeah, he's out of all the characters in the franchise, he's the one who has a really well-rounded journey so far, getting into the current stuff. But yeah, something about James, I never really vibed to James so much throughout everything, throughout the original series or Fire Walk with Me, or, well, I mean, he was in one episode in the revival, but he always just seemed too, as Laura put it, too sweet but dumb. Like, and he never registered beyond just being the sweet guy. Like, Donna was more interesting than him.
Yeah.
Like, was there anyone who you really didn't enjoy much in the first season? Was there anyone who were kind of like, this isn't working for me so much compared to everything else?
Not really. The Nadine stuff does go a little bit over the top sometimes with the quiet blinds, and thank God she finally got to open her store. But she's probably the one for me in the first season. There's quite a few in the second season, which I don't even know their names too, that I thought were kind of out of place. But no, season 1, I thought everybody did a good job of being where they needed to be.
For a while, the first 2 episodes, I'm really not on board with Audrey. But then as she gets more involved into her own contribution to the investigation and going to One-Eye Jacks, I'm like, okay. And the really like freakish twist at the end of the season when she finds out who owns One-Eye Jacks, I'm like, oh, this is going to get uncomfortable next season.
Yeah.
But she worked her way into my heart. She became more endearing as it went on. When she and Coop have that honest conversation in his room in, I think, episode 7 or something like that. Like, that's when she's really started to click for me. But I'll agree. Nadine, out of a show that contains a lot of what the fuckery, Nadine always felt the most, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, especially in those like episodes in season 2 where Lynch was not the head writer anymore, and she's doing the cheerleading practice.
Yeah, let's get into season 2, shall we? Because season 2 picks up with the cliffhanger of, it was the Dallas question, who shot Coop? Mm-hmm. And that took, it took a turn that probably you would expect in a show like this, but then resolved really weird. But that's when more of the supernatural stuff started to sink in. And, I mentioned this before, but we talk a little bit about the world building and how stuff like the black and white lodges and the spirits and things like that came about purely because someone showed up in a background shot, essentially. I don't know. What was kind of your impression of season 2?
I didn't know about Lynch leaving the show, so my first initial reaction was I liked everything up until the reveal of Bob being within Leland, and then it took a really weird turn and got kind of slow and silly for quite a bit of the show, and then I thought it started to pick up more towards the end of season 2, and then when I finished watching it with all of those thoughts in my head, like, wow, season 2 just... am I supposed to be enjoying this later half? And then I saw that Lynch left because of his issues with the studios and them wanting to solve Leland's, Laura's death. And then, he came back towards the end of the second season to try to save the show from cancellation. And that was pretty much right where my issues, started and stopped, was with the removal of Lynch.
Yeah, because for those who don't know, season 2 leads in well from where season 1 left off. They'd start, like you said, to hone in more on who killed Laura Palmer. And for a couple of episodes, who killed Laura Palmer, because guess what? He rises up again and kills the other Laura Palmer lookalike in the show. And then from there on out, it's revealed that Leland is inhabited by this killer spirit named Bob, who... Let's talk about Bob really quick, because Bob wasn't meant to be in the show originally. Or at least that particular version. Actor, and he was a set designer on the show, right? Or set dresser on the show, right?
On the pilot episode, he was crouched down trying to set something up at like the foot of Laura's bed, and Lynch just caught that image, and he's like, we're going to use that.
Yeah. Like, perhaps he had the idea that there was going to be some supernatural stuff playing on later in the show, but that propelled a lot more of the mythology, I feel, is just Frank Silva accidentally showing up in a shot. And he's a freaky looking dude, but that's where you get into the Red Room stuff a little bit more, in that it's not just Cooper's dreams. It's actually this place that's inhabited by otherworldly apparitions or whatever. And then you get into the idea of like these spirits can possess people, like Bob, or like what's his name, Gerard. Mike gets possessed by, or is possessing Philip Gerard, I believe is his name.
Yes.
One-Armed Man, which was actually a call out to The Fugitive, because he's named after Gerard from The Fugitive.
Yep, Philip Michael Gerard.
Yeah, that's what it was. But then, yeah, after Leland's confession, I suppose, or after it's revealed who killed Laura, it felt really directionless for a while. Like, they didn't know what to do with a lot of the characters after that. They didn't know what to do with Coop for a while. And then, for some reason, got him involved with Annie, who I don't mind Heather Graham in season 2 so much. I know a lot of people didn't like her because it took away from the possibility of Audrey and Coop, their dynamic, but she didn't bother me. She was just a little too ordinary.
Yeah, I have a feeling that was going to go somewhere more than it was able to. I wonder if we'll see her in the return. My favorite character in season 2 is Gordon Cole.
Yes.
Love that character. I love him even more now, but man, I loved him then.
Yep. And guess what? It's again David Lynch. One of the best things about the show is David Lynch in it himself. Because, yeah, he finally comes to the town, and that sets up a lot of fun, quirky dynamics, especially between him, Albert, and Cooper. But also, like, who was it that kissed him? Shelley?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to make Bobby jealous. And I'm like, what? Okay, fine. I'll bite. What'd you think of Wyndham Earl?
A good villain. Yeah, I thought that was one of the more redeeming qualities of season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Was when they got more into Wyndham Earl and less of the cheerleading stuff.
Right. Yeah, I like Wyndham Earl a lot. Like, there's a good degree of menace, and it was cool to finally have a character who would have ties to Cooper before he came to Twin Peaks. Because, I mean, Cooper references it early in the series. Like, he had his heart broken, and someone taught him a lesson in the harshness of love and things like that. And you get a little bit into that backstory about Wyndham Earl and his wife, and, what occurred between him and Coop, and his obsession with the black arts. Just weird stuff he did. Like, Leo was his flunky for a couple of episodes, right?
Yeah.
And he wore
till the end, pretty much.
Yeah, he wore like a shock collar and things like that, and covered in tarantulas, or it's implied that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like weird shit like that. And he kidnapped like the Major and tortured him for a while, and then kidnapped Annie, and finally got his comeuppance in the finale.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the finale, because that leads right into the revival, sort of. And what were you thinking when the closing scene of season 2 occurred?
How's Annie? I was like, what? That was my response. I was just like, thank God I don't have to wait 25 years like everybody else did. Like, the show is going to resolve this in a year, not... I'm so glad I didn't have to wait, because that would have driven me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. Like I said, from a season 2 that had some disappointing moments, the finale just completely made you forget about everything else that you didn't like about season 2, because it was so strong. They got David Lynch back to write and direct.
I'd have to say, yeah, I was a little shocked that this was before I realized that the show had been canceled. I thought the showrunners legitimately wanted to end on that term, because I'd seen something like Fire Walk with Me at that point, and I wasn't too surprised about Lynch kind of abruptly upsetting the audience at times with resolutions. I mean, you're glad you're upset because it was a journey to get there, but at the same time, like I said, watch Lost Highway. If you watch Mulholland Drive and you're kind of like, huh? Stuff like that. You kind of expect sometimes David Lynch to really turn 180 when you expect him to turn right. And season 2, before I heard about the mired history on ABC, I was kind of like, okay, that kind of makes sense that he'd end that way. Really just upset the fan base. But then, did you see Fire Walk with Me after the series then? After you did your series run? What'd you think of the movie version?
It started off a little slow, kind of almost like the show we're watching now, but not in a bad way. And I liked the little kind of sequel elements that they threw in there.
Yeah. Well, because time is fluid in this universe we've established.
Yeah, and it's a lot darker than the show.
Mm-hmm. And now, given the context of the revival, there's stuff that's telegraphed in it now, but at the time you're kind of like, well, that's weird that they put that in there. Because it is a prequel, it does follow the actual murder of Laura Palmer, but then it hints to the fate of Cooper or the fate of Annie in the show itself. But
oh yeah, even the original series, man, with the whole... we'll get into it, I guess, with the revival stuff. But
yeah. So you've actually picked up Secret History of Twin Peaks, the book.
Yes.
Is there anything of interest that you feel kind of helps bridge the gap between, I guess, Fire Walk with Me or season 2 into the new stuff?
I'm not really there so much yet, but I like the way that they're incorporating real history with the history of Twin Peaks. Like, it starts with Lewis and Clark discovering the town of Twin Peaks and meeting an Indian tribe that lives there and learning about the weirdness going on in the woods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess that was something they started to establish in the second season, was that the long-standing kind of malignant darkness was something from that predated the modern town itself. Like, it's a spiritual type of entity that's been there for centuries or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep. And the ring. I think they discover the ring that Laura gets in Fire Walk with Me.
Oh, okay. Like Lewis and Clark do? It's just mentioned.
I think so.
Wow. That's kind of cool. Huh.
Yes. I've been listening to it, so my facts may not be 100%, but I'm pretty sure it was Lewis and Clark. They got it from an Indian tribe in the area, if I remember correctly.
I mean, that's what I was kind of saying with regards to the mythology, keeping its eye on the ball. Like, it's rooting in something. It's not like, here again with the Lost stuff, there are points where it feels like Lost really just made it up as it went along and didn't care about wanting to give it a backstory so much. Whereas here, the backstory is given, and you can kind of draw up the backstory for yourself, but he doesn't outright explain it to you.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into Showtime's Twin Peaks revival, which, very much like Fire Walk with Me in the second season, I'm sure lost a lot of diehards and gained a lot more diehards on the way. Since we're going to be on episode 12 here tonight, actually, what would be your overall impression so far of the series?
I'm glad I went into it knowing what I knew. I knew it was going to be more like Fire Walk with Me than the original TV show, and I knew that Lynch was calling it a movie and not really a TV show. And going into it knowing and watching it more as a movie than a television show, it totally is a movie. Like, that first 6 episodes is an amazing first act. And you don't, if like, my wife, she'll sometimes watch it with me and she'll come in and she's like, this is a weird fucking show. I have no idea what's happening. But it's made that way. It's meant to be that way, because every time you watch an episode, each episode, the show makes a little bit more sense and no sense at all, if that makes any sense. So, you're going through, you get through the first act, and then you hit episode 7, which starts the second act, and all the stories start coming together more and more. And, you get into where we're at now, and we're spending more time in Twin Peaks because the stories are getting us there. And I'm telling you, I firmly believe that this was David Lynch's plan all along. He had to have known, this is just too perfect. Like, he set up the 25 years later in season 1, and now he is letting all of that come to fruition 25 years later in this third season, and it's some of the best storytelling. I look forward to this hour of television every week because I know I'm going to get something that I'm not going to get watching Ozark, or I'm not going to get watching Game of Thrones, or any of these other shows, because you don't know what you're going to get. And it's just fun to be able to go there and just focus on this world for 1 hour, and it's been one of the best rides I've ever been on.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on certain points. With regards to he's had this in mind all along, I'm not so much sure about that. Like, I feel, yeah, I'll see you again in 25 years. At first, threw that line in as kind of just superfluous, as something esoteric, because those dream sequences and those points in the Red Room, they're meant to sort of be just surreal and eventually steer you towards a certain conclusion or point, but not putting too fine a point on it. And maybe he had it in his mind at some point, like, maybe I'll do something with that line, but then circumstances just turned out like, oh, I have to step away from this for a while. And then show's done, but he's like, you know what? I'll keep that in mind because I have a feeling this could pay off. Like, yeah, he maybe crafted a lot of the events in the revival around the idea of, okay, I'm finally back to doing this. Let's pick up with that line. Let's pick up with the evolution of certain characters with this 25-year gap. That's where we get stuff like Bobby's development throughout the series. He goes from being that stereotypical jock, druggy jerk to actually being one of my favorite, most well-rounded characters on the show.
Oh man, that moment with him, Shelley, and their daughter at the diner last week, and just the acting that he portrayed in that scene was unbelievable. It was really well done.
I felt so bad for him and Norma in that, especially. Like, when she goes out to meet that... What's his name again? Is it... He's one of the crook guys. I'm trying to remember who he is. But, yeah, like, that was one of the relationships. You're like, no, don't do this to Shelley and Bobby.
It's a perfect Lynch moment, though, because he knows the fans were rooting for Shelley and Bobby.
Exactly.
So he lets you... They were together, right?
Yep.
But they're not together anymore. And you can see, and the acting that the guy conveys that he still loves her. Like, you forget that he's an actor playing a character. All you see is the character, and you could tell that he still loves Shelley, even though she's off with a guy that looks just like Bobby.
Yeah. And throughout a lot of his reappearances in the show, like when you first see him in, I think, episode 4, and you realize, okay, this is the path his life has taken, and he comes into the conference room and all the Laura Palmer stuff is up on the desk. Like,
Yeah.
even though he wasn't in love with Laura necessarily, it was a pretty dramatic point in his life. And so it's just seeing that old homecoming picture of her, and he just starts to break down. Like, he's had the worst case of PTSD ever, and now it's all coming back all at once. Like, he's like, oh, Laura Palmer, oh, brings back some memories.
That's another great thing about this show is these actors are playing their characters from 25 years ago. A lot of shows or movies that come back that long, they're playing caricatures of their characters. But, you know, he is Bobby again. Ray Weiss was Leland in the thing. Even though Dale Cooper is playing or Kyle MacLachlan's playing two different versions of Dale Cooper, you could tell that it's still Dale Cooper.
Right. And, like, you bring back, like you said, David Lynch as Gordon and Miguel Ferrer as Albert. Like, it's just, yeah, Albert is still an asshole, but he's been tempered with age. I love that. It's like, you could clearly see it is still Albert, but he's definitely mellowed out with his age and everything like that, which would make sense. What do you think of, like, the additions to the cast? Because we got not just new characters and new storylines, but also you have the offspring of a lot of characters running around on this show too.
We talk about Andy and Lucy's son.
I mean, he only shows up for one episode, but yeah, sure, let's talk about Wally.
Did he remind you of the other guy in season 2 that she was trying to decide which one the father was?
Who was that? Was Tremaine? Was that his name?
Yes.
Tremaine,
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because you see that a little bit, which maybe gives you a final conclusion on who the parent really is.
Yeah, I'm in a lot of Twin Peaks Facebook groups, and that moment was very divisive between the group. Either people absolutely loved it and thought it was brilliant, and everybody else just did not like that few moments of awkwardness with their son, which I loved. I thought it was great.
Well, I mean, that's a staple of a few Lynch moments is when, again, I'm going to come back to this word, the quirkiness of a performance or a scene overwhelms you to the point where it does become awkward. Like, going back to Fire Walk with Me, when David Bowie shows up in Fire Walk with Me, it's weird and bizarre and uncomfortable, but I enjoy it. Especially if you see the extended version of that scene, where it isn't cut with all the convenience store apartment stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's super uncomfortable at times, and I think he excels in keeping the audience on the verge of being overwhelmingly uncomfortable, but still enjoying it. And I'm getting a lot of that in this new season. Is he'll play out scenes and takes and storylines to the point where it doesn't wear thin on you, but you're still involved in it. The Dougie stuff.
Every time I think that that's going to play out the next episode, it doesn't. I love it. I love all of it.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, but part of me feels like David Lynch knows this is pissing someone off out there. I'll admit, around episode 6 or so, where I'm like, okay, come on, Coop, get back to reality here a little bit. But then I'm along with it, because then he dictates Doug Coop's story as just being a farce. Like, all this stuff is happening to him without his knowledge, and it's just sheer luck and blind fortune.
I think Lynch is an internet troll.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's like Lynch is purposely trolling his audience right now with this Dougie stuff. But I'm enjoying the hell out of it because I can see what he's doing. Like, I feel that's what he's doing. He's like, oh, you guys wanted us to come back to the same old, same old? Well, I'm on Showtime now, bitches. I'm going to do whatever I want.
And that's another thing, man. I think that he did a really good job. Like, most people would have come back to the show and they would have given the fans what they want and forced a bunch of characters into the show that maybe don't serve the story. But in this case, I feel like all of the actors that have returned, they're doing a really good job of servicing the story as opposed to the story servicing their return. Like, you know, David Duchovny does reprise his role as Denise, but it's a quick second, which makes sense. It's not like something that's shoehorned into the movie or show.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's all we're going to see of James Marshall in the show, is him showing up at the Bang Bang bar just to share a reminiscing moment with Shelley.
Absolutely. And the surprise for me in this series was Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, honestly, I never really thought much of Matthew Lillard's acting talents before, because all I'd really known him as being was Shaggy.
Yeah, Scooby-Doo and She's All That. And Scream, he was in Scream.
Oh, yeah, and one of the guys from Scream. I mean, and he's hilarious in Scream, don't get me wrong. I don't think he's menacing. I think he's adorable. But, yeah, his turn as this really just flipped out principal.
Yeah, man, he channels his inner Ray Rice in episode 10, I think it was, when he's in the police station and completely breaks down.
Yeah, like that was, you mentioned, Scream's Ray Wise acting there is really, like, effective, but at the same time there's a little bit of melodrama and corniness there that makes me enjoy it on two different levels. Like, I'm like, he's pouring his heart and soul into this, but man, is this fun to watch.
And I get tears in my eyes every time the Log Lady shows up.
Oh, yeah.
It's so sad to see her.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, too, is a lot of cast members either went into retirement or passed away, and fortunately, he was able to film stuff with her before she passed away. That's something else I feel he's addressing. Like, there are points where I feel he's breaking down the fourth wall with the audience in the writing. Like, the Log Lady stuff, you get that the actress died, and she was in bad health to begin with, but that she's never going to interact with anyone except via telephone. But it works for the story, but at the same time, part of your brain is aware of what took place behind the camera there. It's the fact that, like, well, we could only get her for so long because she was in ill health. And not everyone had committed to the project yet. So, of course, she's not going to share screen time with Hawk except via phone conversations. And bringing in Robert Forster to take over the Truman role, essentially as another Truman.
Yeah.
Because Michael Onkeen, Harry, has retired from acting, I believe.
Yeah, he's in Hawaii now.
Yeah, so, and he, I guess, wasn't open to returning. Yeah, it's a lot of that. I feel David Lynch wanted to continue the story on his own terms, because you can tell with the original Peaks that network wrangled quite a bit. Not just with the idea of, like, we want the mystery to be resolved, but also, like, network standards, there's only so much you can get away with, and that show pushed a lot of those boundaries, but still was hampered by them.
Oh yeah, man, episode 8 never would have aired on network television.
Yeah, like the closest they got to was the season 2 finale, which is, the last 20 minutes or so is complete surreal mind trip. Whereas, episode 8, which I talked about on a previous McChats, is so far one of my most viewed videos. And very divisive, too, because people are explaining, like, no, this is what this means. This is what this means. Yeah, episode 8 of The Revival is pure filmmaking over sensory magic.
Do you think Laura is dead?
She's dead, but someone tried to Twin Peaks explain this to me in one of the comments, I believe, but I feel what is going on in that, which may or may not get resolved, because again, Lynch might just subvert our expectations and say, nope, I'm just telling whatever, I'm not going to have an actual conclusion. Is that these spirits or these entities that we've known to come from the lodges, that you have the characters like the that alien looking critter from the first episode of The Revival, and Bob, and you have those kind of more malicious spirits out there corrupting people in the world, and that Laura Palmer, in theory, was supposed to represent the deterrent from the White Lodgers, was supposed to represent purity, even though the character herself is not pure by any means necessary. As you find out in the show and in the movie, she was in a lot of shady stuff and was actually kind of manipulative. But you get the sense that originally her intent on Earth, or her intent on the mortal plane, was to be sort of a pure deterrent to those evils. And that's why these malicious spirits kind of seek her out or try to corrupt her. And when she does get corrupted, but not fully corrupted, that's when they go the extra mile and try to do away with her, so they can just run free in other characters like Coop. Yeah. And that's why you get the evil Coop doppelganger running around getting revived by woodsmen and shit. Yeah, I have a feeling she's dead, but she was supposed to represent something more. And it's not, in no way, shape, or form is it going to go the whole route of like, well, she's resurrected back from the dead or anything like that. I don't think it'll go that route. Like, as weird as Twin Peaks gets, as weird as it is to say, it maintains some kind of foothold in a grounded sort of reality. Even though the characters are outlandish, and even though you have people's heads exploding, it's not going to go that full extra mile and just start bringing back resurrecting characters, I don't think. Sometimes you can't work around it, like, what's his name? Michael J. Anderson, Man from Another Place, didn't want to come back. So they replaced
Lynch didn't invite him back.
Yeah, or Oh no, I thought he declined.
No, he went crazy. He started saying that Twin Peaks was Lynch's confession of being a pedophile.
Oh, yeah.
He's been saying some really bad stuff about Lynch on the internet for the last, 3 or 4 years.
So, why not replace him with a tree? Sure. Okay, well, there you go. So, there are those circumstances, too. Like, I don't know what the deal is between him and Laura Flynn Boyle at this point, or even Moira Kelly, who played her in the movie. I don't think she's slated to show up at any point.
I know Audrey was with all the cast at the initial like interviews and stuff saying that she was enjoying being back, but we have yet to see her, and we don't know what. Well, I guess we do. We know she survived the bombing because they referenced.
Wouldn't it be weird if Wouldn't it be weird if like she shows up and because of the bombing, like she's just horribly scarred or disfigured, or has bits and pieces of Pete welded to her? That'd be horrible. I know, but part of me's like Lynch could possibly do that.
I think the Dougie Cooper storyline is happening somewhere else. That's one of my theories. I think it's happening elsewhere, whether it's a little bit earlier or a little bit more in the future or in that other place that they were talking about. I don't think it's happening within the same frame as everything else.
Oh, like on another plane, or because I feel it is timeline-wise, it is taking place at the same time because they mail back his key from the Great Northern, and Ben Horne receives the key. True. So I feel
about that little piece of evidence.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too, is that there's a lot of little details that if you don't pick up on the first time around, you got to go back and find again. Like Ben Horne's whole thing. Granted, Jerry's off tripping in the woods somewhere, but Ben's whole thing is he's hearing this weird hum in the room. Yeah, with Ashley Judd. Does she hear it too, or is she just placating him because she likes him? Because that's a good question. My theory is that Ben was never quite right in the head after getting brained by Doctor. What? God, I can't remember the last name of that family for some reason right now. Yeah, Dr. Hayward like brains him right at the end of the second season. Yeah. And it's like, will he live or die? And he clearly lived, but maybe he's fucked up in the head because of that. Who knows? And Ashley Judd's just placating him because she's like, yeah, he's attractive, sure. Yeah, so you have the key being mailed back to him. I can see what you mean is that it feels really detached. The Dougie stuff, even though it's got Coop in it, feels so detached from everything else. Yes, like all the stuff that's happening within that side of the storyline is starting to loop together, and everything that's happening with the Twin Peaks storyline is starting to come together, but there's not a whole lot of crossing over between those two yet. Yeah. Well, I mean, they've got 6 episodes to resolve something. Now, has he gone on the record at all saying like, oh, we'll be back? Or is he said that this is the story that he wants to tell for this particular story, but he has not ruled out the possibility of doing more. See, that's the maddening part for me is like, oh man, because I went in going like, there's a definitive conclusion. There could be a definitive conclusion to all this. But the way the pacing has been with certain subplots, I'm kind of wondering like, does he want to give more time to these down the line in another series perhaps or another season? Or is this it? Like the stuff with Richard Horne, with the grandson. I'm really curious as to why this kid is such a wreck. I mean, he's unlikable, don't get me wrong, but what steered him so wrong in life that he is this much of a malicious asshole? Well, one of the things I noticed, especially in episode 11, and I was watching again season 1, is when Coop is in Twin Peaks and comes initially, he's commenting about how good the town is, how like genuinely good everybody is, and how they generally care for each other. And now watching Twin Peaks, you're seeing a lot more darkness in the town. You see Horne doing all of these really bad things. You see the one sick person in the car, the kid who grabs the gun, and just all of this horrible stuff that is now happening in Twin Peaks. I like that contrast. I noticed it. I wonder if it has to do with the start, which was Laura Palmer's death. Yeah, and actually, that is, now that you think about it, is hinted at in Fire Walk with Me, with that opening stuff with Chris Isaac and Kiefer Sutherland. Is they're investigating the Teresa Banks murder, which actually took place a full year before Laura Palmer's murder, and happened to a town up the way, which is kind of like the negative zone version of Twin Peaks, because you go back to that first part of the movie, they have their version of like the police department, except they're all like assholes. Yeah. And you have all these characters there that are somewhat reflective of other characters you've seen on the show, but they're more malicious or they're more seedy and, let's say, corrupted. So I'm kind of
police department a little bit too.
Yeah, so you're kind of wondering, like, is that what's happening to Twin Peaks now? Is that corruption has fully infiltrated the town and is turning people, like you said? I'm kind of wondering, like, is that having to do with Evil Coop's migration? Because he's heading towards Twin Peaks, right?
I think so, and every episode you get a little Dale Cooper element in Dougie.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit more so.
Fine. He said damn fine on his own.
Right. Like, he's rediscovering a little bit more. And I'm kind of wondering how that's going to play out. Because, honestly, the Dougie stuff I wasn't sure about it, but it's worked its way into my heart. Like, the Janie E stuff. Like, I like him and Naomi Watts together, honestly. At first, I thought she was a little annoying. But as the situations played out to be just more farcical, I kind of like her a lot more.
Yeah.
And Tom Sizemore as kind of his nemesis at work. I was kind of liking that. I'm like, how are we going to resolve this stuff? Because the end of last episode, he's eating his cherry pie with Jim Belushi and Robert Knepper.
I like how they use the coffee to get Dougie out of his office.
They lure him with it, right? I do like that a lot. Like, part of me is wondering, because that's the thing, it's like, okay, we're 12 episodes in and he's still barely functioning. How are you gonna, really propel him into the finale here, if that's supposed to be the finale? Like, will he be fully revitalized Coop, or will he have to just remain this way?
Yeah, will Lynch troll the audience and leave him as Dougie? Honestly,
I'd be okay if he stayed as Dougie, because things seem to be working out well, and I like Coop enough, like, you know what? You deserve to have a family with Naomi Watts. Why not?
that sex scene with Dougie was one of the best scenes ever on television.
She's like losing her stuff on him, and he is like just smiling stupidly.
Somebody in my Twin Peaks group was like, doesn't that mean Dougie was technically raped because he can't consent to it?
I guess, but I mean, it's...
Seem to enjoy it.
I mean, out of all the stuff that's taken place on this revival so far, you know what? That's the most inoffensive sexual thing that's taken place.
Well, let's talk about Diane for a second. What do you think of her?
Yeah, I liked what they did. I had a feeling that's who the reveal was going to be. Yeah, I was like, if we're going to start visiting characters that we've never seen on screen before, I had a feeling Lynch intended for that to be a long-standing collaborator. So Laura Dern was a pleasant surprise. I'm interested to see like what her connection to the overall Evil Coop stuff is, because it's clear she has some kind of connection with him.
Yeah. With
that version of Cooper. She does a lot great acting-wise. Her constant use of "fuck you, Albert" is kind of fun. I don't know. I'm interested to see more of what she's supposed to add to it, because right now they've kind of, ever since the jail, they've kind of relegated her to just traveling with them.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff I feel she could have handled is being handled by the new girl, whatever her name is. I can't remember her name right now. The new FBI agent, the younger
Jennifer
one.
Connelly. No, that's not Jennifer Connelly.
That's not Jennifer Connelly, but I can't remember her name right now. But yeah, she's like the new blood that's assisting Albert and Gordon.
Oh, Tammy, right?
Tammy, yes. Like, I have a feeling there's certain things maybe Diane could have filled in for instead of her. Because Tammy, I'm not saying the actress is doing a bad job or the character is necessarily bad, but that's the one character where I'm kind of like, why is she here? Is she just here to be a new set of eyes? Because everyone else, like the brothers in Vegas, I get why they're there. Ernie Hudson and his investigation, I get why that's there. That's the tie-in with Briggs. But her, in something where you already have Gordon and Albert on the case, like, she and Diane could have been amalgamated, probably. I don't know, but Again, she's not bad. It's just like you kind of raise your eyebrow at certain choices. Like that, I mean, that's always been a thing with David Lynch too. Is sometimes you're just left wondering why. He spends a good 4 minutes focusing on one of the Renault brothers, the one that's still alive, cleaning the bar, and that's it. And you're like, why? Do you realize who Amanda Seyfried? What's the name of her husband? Is it Steve or whatever?
Yeah.
You realize who he was having the affair with?
No.
That was Alicia Witt. That was Gretchen, the
Nice.
girl playing piano for Leland in the second season.
Nice.
So it's all tying together there, at least. But yeah, there's just some little moments in the show where you're kind of like, okay, that's weird, for the sake of being weird. Moving on, I guess.
Yeah, overall though, man, I'm loving this. When it's all said and done, I'd love to go back through and do a commentary on each episode with you.
Oh, okay, well, each episode of just the revival or of all Twin Peaks?
The revival. I feel like there's so much that we could talk about.
Dude, the way things are going, I'm kind of wondering what will happen next. Like, Lynch said he wasn't able to get Bowie. Part of me's wondering if he's lying and he did get Bowie at some point.
Well, I think he is lying because he also implied that the log lady wasn't going to be in it.
Yeah. And the way they keep dropping Jeffrey's name in here, I'm like, okay, he's got to have some Bowie footage or at least voiceover or something going.
Because as far as I know, Margaret died, or the actress died, before they actually went into the main filming of this show.
Yeah, like a year or 2 years before this was released, yeah. Heck, at this point, I won't be surprised if Joan Chen shows up in just voiceover as a doorknob.
Me neither.
Like, why not?
I honestly won't be surprised if we see Harry Truman at some point, too. Even if it's quick.
Yeah, even if it's really quick. Well, I mean, that's the thing. They utilize a lot of archive footage really well into this.
Oh, yeah, they did, especially with Bob.
Yeah, with Bob, a little bit with the Major. Like his floating head, essentially. Which is freaky as shit.
And just the whole thing, the way they've incorporated that character into the show has been really well done. And I can't say it enough, man. Kyle MacLachlan playing both sides of Cooper this season, and the way that he transforms his face to look like Bob in certain aspects in the prison sequences was really good.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a nice marriage of nostalgia and avant-garde filmmaking, I feel.
Yeah.
And, right.
You know,
it feels like a film.
Genuinely is excited to be on set. You could tell. They all love being there.
Well, I'm still waiting on my Audrey reveal. Like, I really am curious what he's going to do with her.
Me too.
Right.
He has got a lot of fans and high anticipation for her return.
One thing I want to kind of wrap up with here, perhaps, is there one character that you don't know for certain is going to show up or not, that you were like, man, if that shows up, that'll make it? We mentioned a couple, but like, your guilty pleasure one. The one character you're like, they haven't shown up yet, I don't know if they will, but if they do, holy crap. Because I was thinking about this yesterday, actually, while I was watching some old episodes. I'm kind of like, you know what? I would love to see... Oh, God, what was the name of the old lady whose grandson with the paper mache mask?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'd love to see what that kid grown up would be like. Even though, I mean, not grown up because he's probably an inhabitant of the apartment and things like that, but we have yet to see him, I think, so I'd love to see what he'd be like. I'd also love to see this tie into other Lynch stuff. Like, I have a feeling you could tie this into Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway pretty well.
Yeah, I guess the Woodsmen are taken from some of that stuff.
There's a woodsmanish type sequence in Mulholland Drive.
Yeah.
That freaked me the fuck out when I first saw it. I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting that, but okay.
I guess my answer would be Harry Truman.
Harry Truman, yeah. Yeah, I'd like to see him triumphantly return, but only time will tell in 6 more episodes.
Yeah, because he's got to be there, because Coop had a dream that he was sitting with an older Hawk and an older Harry.
But I guess we'll find out, perhaps tonight. Twin Peaks, the revival, or the return, I guess it's being called. Typically airs 9 o'clock on Showtime on Sundays, and has been going steady. Now, granted, I've had to DVR it since Game of Thrones started because that takes precedence, but immediately after Game of Thrones, I start watching Twin Peaks, so I'm in for a solid 2 hours of entertainment. If you wish to catch up on it, I know they've got the full series on Amazon Prime, both season 1 and 2, and all currently released episodes of season 3 are available for streaming on Amazon Prime. Thanks for chit-chatting some peaks with me, Jason.
No problem, man.
And again, you can catch more of Jason and the Three Geeks over at youtube.com/3geeksnetwork. But also you'll see us in the Columbus area this coming weekend, August 4th, 5th, and 6th at Wizard World Columbus, Greater Columbus Convention Center. Check it out. Come to the booth, try to beat Max in Mario Kart, win prizes, and come to our panels. Should be
absolutely. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. But you've been listening to a very special Twin Peaks McChat here on McGTV, youtube.com/MikeMcGTV. Follow me on Twitter at MikeMcGTV. Have yourself a nice piece of delicious cherry pie, and we'll see you next time.
Some damn good coffee.
Mm-mm-mm.